Hey, I'm Dr. Jorgensen from Frontier Pediatrics, and I'm here with my partner,
Dr. Corinne.
and we're here to talk about sex. Before we start, there's something that I feel like is really important. I always try to kind of talk with parents about if I have people that ask me about it, and it is setting that kind of foundation that when you talk to your kids about sex, you have to think about the fact that you're setting a foundation for all of those important but uncomfortable conversations their entire childhood and their entire life, right? So if we can talk to them about sex when they're little, even when they're like 2 or 3 and they're like, Mommy, where do babies come from? Or what is that part right there? Or why does Johnny have that and I have that, right? You're already setting that foundation so that they feel like you're that super safe person that's always going to tell them the truth, that they can totally trust, that has their back, and is going to let them know what they need to know. And that carries on. So then when you're having those like even more uncomfortable conversations when they're teenagers, you have that foundation laid. And so that's why it's so important to talk to them and not wait until the very end. You want to start young.
Early.
Because they need to know those things because it's actually protective for them, and we'll get into some of that. But because you're becoming that safe person that they know they can rely on for information. So I feel like, though, that's important because I think that sometimes when you bring up talking about sex with parents, when it's young children, they kind of like everybody kind of balks a little bit, and they're like, "Are you kidding? Like, why would I do that?" I don't know. Do you have a different perspective on it or feel the same, or what's your thoughts?
I would say similarly because you want to create that environment where your kids feel safe to talk to you. And so if you don't start that early, then they're not going to talk to you or they're going to be fearful about reactions when they do come to you when it is something more imperative or worrisome.
Yeah. I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking of, I think we both have the unique perspective of we have teenagers and you have Sav's 21.
Almost 20.
Almost 20. And Ella is almost 17. And one of the things Ella's told me, and I'm sure Sav feels the same way with you, is Ella's like, Mom, I can talk to you about anything, and most of my friends can't talk to their moms, and I'm so thankful for that. And it's one of those things, like, I don't even think I truly realized what I was helping create when she was little, and now that she's coming to me with things that sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's talking to me about this. Like, oh gosh, like poker face, act like it's cool, this is totally fine. But I'm really, really thankful. And I don't think I truly appreciated that until now I'm on this side where I'm like, wow, I'm really, really thankful we can have these conversations.
I even got that comment this week where she called and said, I can't believe other parents don't talk to their kids like we talk.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. We like live what we're talking and reap the benefits, I would say, of what we're talking about. So
For sure.
Okay. Early conversations when they're little, kind of where do you normally start? Where did you start with Sav? How do you recommend parents start those conversations? Is there an age that's a good age? Do you wait for them to bring it up? What's your thoughts?
I honestly don't know how those conversations ever got started. I just remember an early conversation when I was sick one day, and my daughter's response was, you should go to Planned Parenthood because I worked at Planned Parenthood once a month or something. And so, like, that was, like, something that just kind of was always you go to the doctor when
she
you
was the
don't
doctor.
feel good.
That was the doctor's office. That's funny.
Um,
And then you were later on, you were like, maybe Planned Parenthood is what you think Planned Parenthood is.
Yeah. So just kind of, like, that's kind of like my first vivid memory of, like, just having kind of like an open relationship with my kid about growing up and things going on. And it didn't even have to do with anything with sex. It was just like, this is it's normal.
Association,
Yeah.
Ella, I specifically remember my sister, who's 7 years younger than me, was pregnant with her first kid. And Ella was probably 3 or 4. I should be able to figure out how old she was, but I can't think of it right now. But she wasn't elementary age yet. And I remember specifically she was like, Mom, where do babies come from? And she'd asked me that before, and we'd had kind of a little, appropriate discussion where I was like, well, mommies and daddies have babies, and babies grow inside of mommies' bellies, and, kind of very, very vague. And then she was like, no, how does the baby get inside? And then I was like, oh, she like really wants to know this. I can't kind of skirt around it anymore. And so then I had them more like, well, you know how daddy's body is different than mommy's body, and kind of like in a very light way was like, well, daddy's parts go inside mommy's parts. And I can't remember if I actually used penis and vulva or penis and vagina at 4. I don't think I did. I don't think I was ready to take that jump yet. Even though we called them penises and vaginas, maybe I did. I can't remember.
I don't think you had I wouldn't think that you had like a code name.
No,
right?
I didn't
because
have a
I get
code
a lot
name.
of that in the office. Like
you're right. It wasn't like a strawberry or I don't know.
flower.
Or yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I would have used. So I probably did use correct terms. Yeah, I would think I would. I think anyway. But I remember just being so almost a little bit taken aback where she was like, no, I really want to know what this is. And it was very natural and appropriate curiosity. And then the next part, she was like, and I want to know how the baby comes out. And that was like a really big deal to her because she was like, no, it just doesn't suddenly appear. Something happens. So then I remember having to talk to her about how babies come out of vaginas and how mommies push babies out. And then sometimes they come out in surgery and the doctor will take the baby out. And I remember, what I remember is she just decided she wasn't going to have babies for a really long time after that. But I do remember talking to her about that. And, as I'm saying it out loud, you're right. I never used like weird terms like you were saying.
I get a mix of parents having like special terms that probably their parents and the parent, right? And then I get some where it's totally opposite, where you'll say scrotum or
like very specific.
And then the parents will be like, no, your balls, right? So I've kind of gotten a mix of, I get a mix of both.
Right. I'd say from the, one of the reasons to use correct terms is from the child abuse realm that I was in, when we would, have to see kids that had, unfortunate things happen. When they would use words like flower or strawberry or use words, it was really difficult to actually understand what had happened to them because they weren't using appropriate terms.
And they probably didn't even know.
Terms. And so it's actually one of those things that can actually be a safety thing, is the more kids are able to use correct terminology for their body parts, the more they can use vagina, vulva, penis, testicles, those kinds of things, the better and the safer they are. And actually, when they've looked at it, this is a terrible thing, but the people who prey on children are intentionally looking for children who don't have words and can't describe what happened because they're an easier victim that can be re-victimized. And so you actually are empowering your children and protecting them in a way by giving them words, appropriate words for those body parts. And then in the same way talking about, because that's part of what you would talk about when they're little, is like, not just the sex, but, how do we keep our body safe and what's private and what's okay and what's not okay? Who can look, who can wipe, who can't look, right? All those things. How did you navigate that with Sav?
It seems so long ago that I don't really even recall.
Again, I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry, Corinne. But I do remember.
You do better at talking a lot.
Mine was in the car a lot because we would talk about like, oh, you're going to put on your seatbelt. And then I would do random things. I'd be like, so what if Uncle Johnny asked you to come to the bathroom with him and like he looked at your vagina? What would you do? And then kind of see how they would respond. But so I would like talk to him about it and then also like do almost this kind of like role play, like, well, what would you do in this situation? And then I throw out other things like, what happens if you were, in other safety, like what happens if you were staying over at grandma's house and she didn't put you in the car seat? What would you do? Or, those kind of like, as I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, oh, that sounds like I'm a crazy mom. But it was kind of those like giving them those scenarios and those real life applications of like, oh, well, I would just do this, if that makes sense.
So they have more an awareness. So if something did happen inappropriately, that
they were like
trigger.
Yeah,
like,
that wasn't supposed to happen.
Right.
That's not supposed to be that way.
And if you never talk about those things,
right,
then they're not going to know what is normal and appropriate and what isn't
right.
appropriate.
Yes. I'm trying to think. are there any other like big things you can think of when they were little? I'm just thinking of like, where do babies come from? That was a big one. And then appropriate body parts, and then some of that like initial body safety types of conversations. Those were the big things that I really hit with my kids when they were little, in that like toddler, early elementary age.
Yeah, I mean, that I think is kind of the most important, is like creating an awareness and normalizing the body parts. It's just, everybody has a nose.
Right.
Everybody has a hand.
Right.
You know, everybody has body parts. It's just another body part that needs to be more protected.
Right. You label it just like we label others. But I mean, actually, I use that example with my kids. I'm like, you don't like blow your nose in front of everybody always, like just in your hands, right? You're going to go to the bathroom and you use a tissue, or you don't just like fart in front of everybody. And so there's some things that are more private. And I remember kind of using some of those analogies, like trying to think of like, okay, what would be something to normalize? Like, yeah, we don't just like pull our pants down in front of everybody all the time. What are some other things that we don't do in front of everybody all the time? And trying to kind of use that as an example for them as they were learning those things. Yeah. Anything else?
I think that kind of hits the early
highlights. Hey, thanks so much for watching this educational video. I hope it was helpful. If you have any more questions, you can always reach out to us at Frontier Peds. You can call us, or you can go to our website.